Is it really Valentine's Day? You know, I think the American that wants to be loved the most is Donald Trump. Boy, the Donald is after it. Meanwhile, in the White House, Grumpy Joe is busy taking a nap. Welcome to Grounded, the place to hear the salty truth. I'm your host, Scott Cates, coming to you live from the Northeast Georgia mountains and the tiny town of Tiger, where today it's raining pretty good. That seems to be the forecast. Lots of heavy rain today. But at least it's not snow a foot deep like they're getting forecasted in some parts of America today. So that's okay. I just think on days like today where it's raining like this, right on the Weather Channel, right up front, they ought to put like a mask and snorkel when you're expecting 2 to 3 inches of rain. Valentine's Day coming up. That's an amazing little holiday, really, or if you want to call it a holiday. And I just got curious. I wanted to know, where did we get this whole idea? And I'm not going to take you through the whole St. Valentine thing and all of that, but with the whole idea of Valentine's, how long have we been doing this, sending these messages, celebrating love and friendship and, these things that come along with Valentine's Day? And I was just curious because I was thinking about being a kid and, getting the little box of Valentines, which at that time you could get a box of Valentines for like 25 or 50 cents. They were super cheap. Now they're like $9. Wow. I mean, but anyway. And I looked it up and it said, it's a day of sending cards and messages of love and friendship and sending confectioners, to people, confection to people and things like that. So I looked all of that up to think, how long have we been doing this? And the truth is, for those of you that just want to know for OG Wiz trivia's sake, these messages have been being sent like this since about the 1500s, really. But they don't really go into commercial pressing or the printing press until the 1700s. And in the United States, we don't actually see commercial Valentine's cards printed until the mid-1850s. And I knew that they were fairly old, because I had bought this book from an antique store a couple of years back that was on the assassination of William McKinley. And inside it was just it was a book that had come out within I think a year of the assassination of William McKinley, telling you about his life and what all took place there. And inside that book were a number of cards. But there was a Valentine's Day card that had not been written on that was dated 1888. It still had the little envelope with it. And I thought that was kind of cool. Didn't know how long Valentine's, I always thought Hallmark really pressed it hard, but I think Hallmark just really put the commercialism to it. Those little confectioner's hearts, those little candies that they have the little message like "kiss me" and things like that are on it. Those have been around. I don't know how long this has been around. Probably since about the 1950s, maybe earlier than that. I'm not real sure, to be honest with you, but that's what you usually see, about this time. And you see all of that come out. How important is it really to be loved? Well, for Donald, they see. For the Donald, it's pretty important because he loves it. I mean, he gets in front of a crowd and he loves it when they cheer for him. He just loves being loved. And you want to see him get upset. Wait till he finds when he actually finds someone that doesn't care for him much. He doesn't deal with that well. So he has a need, I think, just to want to be loved by many people, and which keeps him pressing on to do what he's doing. He also wants to be known as someone great, I think, and that's a good drive to have. I think it's not bad at all. Meanwhile, in the headlines this week, you can see, boy, they are after Joe Biden and his cognitive decline. And everyone's piled on from just every area of media, from conservative media to liberal media to all over the map. And there's a concern for that. With that goes a ton of rumors and everything about who's going to be is he going to continue to run for office? And of course, all the big speculation that he'll get to the convention, and when they get to the convention, they'll swap him out and all of those things. The one thing we do know is that we don't know. We don't have any idea what they're going to do, so we just keep pressing on. And what does it look like? Well, it's been a good week for Donald, actually, in the fact that all of his cases seem to be that are against him. All of these court cases that have come against him seem to be sort of imploding one by one. And of course they are. Because if you look at most of the cases, they're just, you look at them, you think to yourself, you've got to be kidding me. The one case that was against the statute of, way beyond the statute of limitations, they award the person that sued him on that. And where do you ever hear about that actually? You don't hear about that happening much, but you can tell that really it's not just the liberal media, but it's the liberal court system that's really sort of piled up. But unfortunately, they have a lot of skeletons in their closet as well. And so as those begin to get uncovered, that sort of really breaks down the case altogether. And then finally, with the whole, President Biden in the handling of classified documents, and they find him guilty of that. But yet, no charges are filed. That all is just kind of imploding there as well. So all of this is great news for Donald Trump, who's running for office. But at the same time, we just, you have no idea what's happening. It looks like that he's pretty popular out there as he runs for his party as well. And so as he continues to run for that, Donald having the need to be loved, being where he is, he just continues to go. He is like the Energizer Bunny, just going, going, going. And he goes from one place to the next place, to the next crowd, to the next crowd. And I think he just loves the fact that he gets out there, and they really do, they care to see him. There is a need, by the way. Is love really all that important? It sure is. And we'll talk about the kind of love that's important in just a minute. But I also want to go through some other headlines today, things that are out there. So in all of this, here's one of the things that happened. One of the headlines today, Joe Biden apparently bumps his head on Marine One as the debate persists over his mental fitness. Look, folks, here's what I can't figure out. It's 2024. How come they have not invented an escalator for the president to get off the plane? Just step out and the thing just kind of lowers and comes on down. Automatic escalator. You'd think by 2024, someone would have invented that so that the president's not having to run down those steps on no matter. And this is 4 steps to the ground from Marine One, which is the helicopter, not Air Force One. But still, I keep wondering every time that Joe starts to make that descent off the aircraft, I keep thinking to myself, why haven't they invented an escalator to get the president off of Air Force One? I mean, you'd think they would have come up with that by now. Even your baggage isn't thrown on by a carrier. They lay it on a belt and a conveyor belt, and it goes up to the next level. If they can have a conveyor belt carry your baggage to the next level so that the person on can receive, why can't they build an escalator for the president of the United States and dignitaries to get off the plane with? That's what I'm just wondering. Meanwhile, we're talking about electric cars and AI and all of this stuff. We'll talk about AI in a minute. But all of this stuff, we can't invent an escalator to get the president off the plane. Someone needs to do that. I'm just saying. So if you're out there and you can create that, hey, more power to you. I'm sure that some of the major airports, major airlines would love to talk to you. So that's that's in the headlines today. Just a thought that came to my mind as I was looking at that. Let's see. The other thing that I saw in the headlines was yesterday that there was a shooting at Lakewood Church, and I don't want to sort of embark down into the and take the life out of the podcast today, but we do need to be praying for Joel Osteen's folks there at that church. That's not an easy thing at all. And we see that it looks like it's been a woman that walked onto the scene in a trench coat with a 5-year-old next to her who walks into this church to open fire. Now, we don't know all the details yet, but I can tell you this much. If you're walking in with a 5-year-old and you're hanging on to a 5-year-old, there are some mental health issues going on here. Just saying. And there are an enormous amount of articles about mental health right now that are in the headlines, which I'm going to cover in just a minute too as well. There was one also that I saw, a great headline that talks about the electrical life support system, the background. And you hear me talk about this. You hear me talk about coal and natural gas and nuclear power, all of that. And so the closing down of the coal plants, and then the closing down of the natural gas, with Biden, now saying that he's going to, not use natural gas in that either. Well, those are actually our fallback plans. They also are the life support system. When the power grid cannot handle when there's not enough electricity to go around, wind and solar will never actually make up for coal and natural gas. And that's just saying that, the fact of the power grid being so fragile in this article. And it says the warnings don't just come. I'm going to read from part of this. This is a May 2023 report from the North American Electric Reliability Corporation. And this corporation is charged with overseeing grid reliability. And they state in 2023 that a majority of America's grid is now at heightened risk levels for outages. This report is especially dire warning on America's ability to keep the lights on. All of that has been jeopardized, this report says. And it goes on down and talks about what does this mean? It talks about the fatal trifecta in this article, the destabilization of the power grid as a result of what analysts look at as the fatal trifecta. It goes on, which means you're taking away the backup plan for power. And so the power outage to come. And it talks about the power outages that have come and the ones that we've actually had. And the fact that there's loss of life during these power outages because of certain things that happen to people. Anyway, it just goes on in this report. It's kind of interesting to me that we know that we're in this situation. And the answer is not to close down. That which we fall back on in that. I just wanted to just kind of go there and tell you that they just say that we're at a great, great, great level of the ability for that power grid to fail in some places in moments. And I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist. It's just a reality that they've come up with at the end of 2023. So don't be surprised if you face brownout. Blackout that happens and without power for more than 3 weeks can be catastrophic in an area, it talks about. So, and then it goes on to talk about what the long term would look like. Anyway, if you want to look it up, you can check it out later online. Just look it up, the power grid, if you want to, and it'll tell you a little bit more about that. So those are things that were in my stack of stuff that I always kind of just touch on and get to. But at the same time, there are other things here. And then I'm going to back up to this. This article I thought was kind of interesting. It says how AI girlfriends could mark the end of relationships. And since it's Valentine's Day, we get to talk about AI girlfriends here, being marking the end of relationships. And it talks about the fact that online chat bots claim to offer the perfect online relationships and how young men basically are going to be hooked with this. They're looking to service young and lonely men in particular. And it looks like it could fuel the flames of growing problems with falling birth rates and really young people checking out of the real world because they don't know anything. They don't really know anything about what it means to love. They don't know what it means to be truly in love, to what that actually means. And to be honest with you, to understand what true love is really like, is love really that important? Because there's been an emphasis placed on everything else besides that. And once we place that emphasis on everything else besides that, we have a real issue. And we have a real issue in relationships, first of all. Because relationships that are built on only the physical side of a relationship, that's not love. It isn't. Matter of fact, that wanes after a while. And when it does, the physical side of the relationship, that's not love. There's a connection that takes place there, but it's not love. It's a lustful moment. I'm talking about that transcends over that. I'm talking about that actually moves beyond that. If you really want to know what it's like for a man to love a woman, I've talked about this. I'm not going to go back through that in this podcast, but you can go back to season 1 of the podcasts here. You can look those up online. You can click on the link and go back, if you're listening to this, to season 1 and listen to episode 2 about what happens when a man falls in love with a woman. And so that is going to be, I mean, if you decide to go all the way back to season 1, episode 2, just go all the way back to that and click on that podcast and listen to that. What that actually means, what actually takes place, what's not being talked about, what used to be the core of black and white movies. Since the motion picture industry began and was taken out somewhere really in the 1960s for other purposes as well. Romance, true and genuine romance, has really nothing to do with the physical side of the relationship. True and genuine romance has everything to do with the love of actually just being together and inseparable. There's something about that that's amazing. And anyway, just talking about, is love really all that important? It is. Valentine's Day is about love and friendships. That's important. The friendships are important, and love in your friendship is important. We'll talk about love in just a minute, and I'll go through those traditional verses as we talk about that. But as I continue on, what happens when love goes awry? What happens when love, we just don't know what it is? What happens when we don't actually have it or we just can't find it? I got another article here that says, concerns grow over links between transgenderism and violence. And it says an increase in mass shootings by gender-confused individuals is sparking concern over the volatile cocktail of mental health issues and body-altering chemicals. It's talking about giving hormones to boys to make them girls and girls to make them boys, that sort of thing, and what that actually causes in the body and creates this idea of violence. But it has a lot to do with the fact of just not being loved. It has much to do with the fact of not being loved. I mean, of really children not being loved for who they are. And it does. That's at the core. Last week, those of you that actually did last week get excited about the podcast, that put some of those things into practice. Those of you that came to talk to me yesterday about that sent me texts online and sent me texts by phone and then called me to talk to me about how much the last podcast before this one really changed the relationship in those 4 things. Every person wants to know that they're needed. Every person wants to know that they're wanted. Every person wants to know that they're loved. And every person wants to know that there's someone there to help them in case something goes wrong. Everyone. And it's a need. And it's not being spoken at all. It's not being said. It's just being assumed that maybe that's the case. But yet relationships are falling apart in record numbers because we're either too prideful or it's all about us. The reality is this. We ought to be telling people, just to go back, these are quick points from last week that you can go back and listen to in its entirety. But there's a need. There's a need to speak the words, I need you. There's a need to hear the words, I need you. I need you in my life. I do. I need you. It's important to be needed. Everyone has a central core that wants to be needed. The second one is I want you. And it's not that everyone wants to be needed because of the fact you can do something for someone. It's the fact that they just want you for who you are and you want them for who they are. That makes a great friendship. Hey, just want you there. I just love who you are. Which brings me to the third part. If you're needed and you're wanted, love comes, which is amazing. And when love comes, there's something that happens in the middle of that you love one another. We'll talk about what that looks like. But folks, there are a lot of children that are born in the United States of America that their parents, where did we come from? Oh, well, you were in an accident or you were this, that. Folks, listen, our children, we need them. They are precious to us. They need to know that they're needed. Second of all, they need to know that they were wanted, that they're wanted. And I've actually heard of parents that actually weaponized the idea of looking up and saying, look, we didn't even want you anyway. So, you were just an accident, and literally use that to discipline their children. We don't understand the kind of cutting to the heart that you actually do, the damage you do to a child when you do that. Or when you're in a relationship and you're in that relationship And you start to say, well, look, I just married you because I had to, not because I wanted to, or not because I needed you in my life. All of that. Those are detrimental. They're terrible terms to weaponize. But then there's another side of that. Just the silence. I don't have a need to tell you that you're needed. You don't have a need for me to tell you that you're needed. The silence of, I don't need to tell you that you're wanted. You should just know that. I don't have to tell you that I love you. You should just know that. And you should just know that I'm here to help. And finally, at the end of that, we see people walking out the door and people running to them, go, but I need you, but I want you, You never said those words. And matter of fact, the behavior looked completely opposite of that. And now all of a sudden you run to say that now. And it's hard to stop that from taking place. And when this is on steroids and it starts with a small child, and we start moving, saying, I'm not satisfied with you, are you, as the gender you are. And we start working on that. We wish you would have been born a girl. We wish you would have been born a boy. And we end up with this. Not good. There's a mental health issue in the United States of America, and it's a big deal. And it's going like gangbusters right now. What is the number one reason? There is a need to be loved at the core. There's a need to be needed. There's a need to be wanted. And the greatest mental health issues that we're facing today is because people don't feel like that's where they are. On top of all of that, in case you weren't empty enough, in the verses that I will read today here, you'll look at this. I'll read that. I'll talk to you about this in just a second. But it says this, that this next article says the tech epidemic is eating away at Americans' minds. We've talked about this also as well, how technology is just eating away at our minds, eating away at our identity. A sudden, unprecedented surge in mental disorders is leaving Generation Alpha at a significant risk. This is about our children. This is the generation that's coming right now. They are at such a great risk of mental disorder because of the fact that they're not engaging in what is needed, the face-to-face. This is important. This is important because I can go over here and I can look in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And he says this in verse 11, when I was a child, I spoke as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. And then he says, for now we see in a mirror dimly, or like a dirty mirror. We see in a mirror that is extremely dirty. We don't see clear, but then we'll see face to face. Now I know in part, but then I'll know just as I am known. One of the things we love to do is we love to see face to face. We love to be known face to face. And this is talking about our faith in God. But I want to tell you something when it comes to everyday relationships that you need to understand as we progress forward in time. And especially as we're coming up on Valentine's Day. You want to look into a very dirty mirror, and you want to look at a very dirty reflection, and you want to look at someone's dirty reflection, you keep text messaging and that's all you do. Because you'll never get to see the genuineness that's behind the words. Boy, it's hard to interpret text messaging sometimes because all you can do is sort of base that on how you feel in the moment. You really can't. It's very difficult. And even though for those that you know well, it's really hard to figure out how to take certain things that are said. So you see, if you really want to dirty up, I think, and really cloud up a relationship, never meet face-to-face, never talk face-to-face, and just talk online. You can put anything you want to out there. Tons of articles on dating apps, that I was looking through before. I was like, oh my goodness, the dating apps. And the number one complaints about dating apps is people aren't who they say they are when they finally get together. There was one on the danger of dating apps and being in the middle of that. But, most of the time, the reality is they paint this picture and you finally get there and you go, and you look nothing like your profile picture. Then you get to know them face to face and they're nothing like what you thought. But at the same time, on the other side, just got to be careful about that because understanding that text messaging, sending back and forth, is not the same as writing a letter where you're waiting and you have anticipation and it's coming from the heart and you can actually look at how it's written. That actually translates. To be honest with you, The way that it's written actually translates to the heart of the individual. It's unique. Text messaging is cold. It is heartless in so many ways. That's why all the emojis had to be invented, so that you could get beyond the cold and heartless. And when you really lay down the cold and heartless in the statements, they can lay down hard in the heart of an individual. So being careful about how we go about that, because it really does take an enormous amount of effort to bring across the feel behind what you're writing in text messaging, in email, in all of that. So I say that there's an epidemic that's eating away at the minds of children right now, Generation Alpha and beyond in that too, because of what's going on with social media and the fact that they're just hooked to the phone. They're looking in at the reflection of humanity, but it's a real dirty reflection of humanity. Reality, that is truth. And finally, the last article I'm looking at here is how to break free of the social media hold, breaking free of that. And this article is written by a little girl. She says, I've been told that I'm a unicorn. I'm a 27-year-old with no social media accounts. She said, I feel like more like a horse that people put a horn on and say, what? This is impossible. Not using social media is sadly countercultural. And she goes into the idea of how she put that down and she walked away from breaking from that social media that had such a hold on her life, and really and what it ended up doing actually after a period of time, a short period of time really, is it made her real life relationships much more meaningful. She goes into the details of how there were so many people she was trying to chat with all the time online. It's because we were designed to have real life, face-to-face relationships. And by the way, we're also designed to have a real life, face-to-face relationship with God. That's what we were created for. And one of the reasons why everything is so run amok is the fact that with faith, trying to have that face-to-face relationship with the Lord Jesus, boy, that's a challenge in some moments, especially when everything about this planet and everything on it is trying to push you away from keeping that focus on Christ. It's interesting because I go to 1 Corinthians, and I talked about this a little bit yesterday with some folks, but 1 Corinthians chapter 12 talks about all the spiritual gifts and everything that was required and all the things that the church would be doing. And by the way, we're busy. We are busy in everyday life, and our busyness basically it just keeps us busy. Let me ask you a question. In the middle of the night when you wake up, what's on your mind? What's really on your heart? Or could I ask you, who's on your heart? Who's on your mind and who's on your heart? That's the question, really. It's Jesus who tells us, see that we're not troubled, make sure that we're careful not to worry, all of those things. It's important. But even with the spiritual gifts that are here, he talks about the church being busy, and they're important, but we should desire those gifts. It's important. But at the very end of chapter 12, verse 31, he says, earnestly desire the best gifts. And then he says, and yet I show you a more excellent way. There is a more excellent way. Because when it comes to actually working and serving and doing for others, there's got to be a fuel. There's got to be some sort of fuel that fuels that. And he goes into talking about what that is. And here's what he says. He says, though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but I have not love, I've become like a sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. Folks, it doesn't take us long, really, to sort of blot out that we hear on a regular basis. Really, it won't take you long to sleep through your alarm if you do that on a regular basis. You can learn the sound of your alarm and just sleep right through it. Some people say, you can't do that. But other people I've known who've slept through an alarm because they've gotten so used to the sound, they change up their alarm in the morning to wake up because they sleep right through it. My household, we have an enormous amount of clocks. I work on clocks, old clocks that you wind up, and so they chime all at one time. So at about 12 noon, if you're going to be in my house, we have to stop for a minute and let all the clocks chime. And then just go back to our conversation. And we've become so used to that, I never even hear my clocks chime. So if you could speak with the tongues of men and of angels, you can be the greatest speaker in the world, but you don't have love. You've just become a sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. Listen, the reality of this, and I had a friend say this to me once before. It's important that you understand that people will forgive you for a number of things, but they will never forgive you for not loving them. Once they settle in their hearts that you really and truly don't care, they're not coming back. People have an earnest, they want to know that you do care about them. They really do want to know that they're loved. There is a desire. It's the way we're made. It's the way God made us. So it's the reason why Paul here is saying there's a more excellent way than this. He says, even though I have the gift of prophecy and I understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I might actually have all faith, so that I could actually remove mountains, but I have not love, then I have nothing. He basically says here, if I am void of love, if I do not have it, that's not a part of who I am. If I love being busy, basically, more than I actually love the people I'm being busy for, I got nothing. I'm holding on to nothing. This, by the way, is a lot of times why when people retire, they lose their identity because they love their work more than they did the people that were in their lives. And that has become an epidemic through the years. He says, and though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and I give my body to be burned, but I have not love, it profits nothing. There's no profit in that. I wonder sometimes if we don't actually, as we get older, understand and realize that the things we've put around us and all the things that we've chased really don't matter. And in the end, it's the ones who are standing there with you, holding your hand, and are loving being in the presence, in your presence, and you're in theirs, that really matters more than anything. You ever had somebody in your life that you just could not wait to be around, could not wait to be near, could not wait to be next to, could not wait to be in the presence of them? There is nothing more amazing than that. But there's also nothing more devastating than that. When you cannot wait to be in their presence, can't wait, and you discover that they really didn't care anything about being in yours. And you look up and you think to yourself, what is this? Because it's devastating to you. When you realize that at the end of it all that was going on, they didn't have love. That was difficult. It's difficult to come to that understanding. What is love? Well, he defines it. In verse 4, he says, love suffers long. Love suffers long. That's different than patience. And I know it. He says love is patient, love is kind. We hear that all the time. But love suffers long. It means that love is willing to wait, really. Love is willing to put up with the things that need to be put up with in order for it just to be, because you love so much. You can't wait to be in the presence of that person. So even if it's time or distance or whatever it is, that until you can get back there, you suffer until you get back there. Suffers long. Love suffers long so much that if there is a disagreement between the two of you at all, you can't stay mad at each other for very long. You know why that is? Because if you spend more than, say, a few hours angry at each other and you truly love one another, there's a feeling that feels like homesickness that comes on because you're separated. You just can't stand it. Love suffers long. It's kind. It does not envy. It doesn't envy what someone else has. You don't envy. You're glad for what they are. It doesn't parade itself. It's not about itself. It's not puffed up. Love's not about you. It's where the other person becomes way more important than you ever imagined they ever would be. They're way more important than you. It becomes about them. Doesn't behave rudely, and it does not seek its own. Doesn't behave rudely in the fact that if you're not recognized on a regular basis for whatever it is that you think you should be recognized for, and you didn't do the things that you were doing for your own personal benefit, but for the benefit of the ones that you loved. It's not easily provoked. Love is not easily provoked. Now, don't get me wrong. There are when two people do love each other a great deal, there are sometimes that in moments you can't believe things are being said, and it's easy. I mean, I see relationships at times people love each other dearly, and they get into the fact, boy, gosh, I had no idea that you would ever say this to me, or that you would ever be like this with me, and those things come, but you grow, and as you grow through those. It thinks no evil. Matter of fact, it's not just the fact that it thinks, it just cannot believe. It doesn't believe that evil, here, it would be even that this person would even be a thought of that. And it's one of the reasons when it comes to our children, sometimes we're shocked to find out my kid did that. Because you love them so much. And you thought, there's no way my kid would do that. It does not rejoice in iniquity. It does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. It doesn't rejoice in iniquity. It doesn't rejoice when sin is being celebrated. This is an important thing for you and I to understand, because in society today, there's the idea of, you ought to love, it's love the sinner and, hate the sin, love the sinner. I hear this all the time. It doesn't rejoice in iniquity. It doesn't rejoice when your children run astray and go, and lean in directions they shouldn't be in, and start into lifestyles they shouldn't be in. It doesn't rejoice when, things are not happening that are against the consent of God. Things are happening against the consent of God. It doesn't rejoice in those things. But it rejoices when we know the people that we love are following in truth. 3 John 4, I have no greater joy than to know that my children are walking in truth. We have no greater joy than to know that we are walking in truth together, whether it's friendship, whether it's a spouse, husband-wife relationship, whether it's boyfriend, girlfriend, even, no matter the relationship, rejoice because we walk in the truth. That's important. Verse 7 says it bears all things. Doesn't mean what gets thrown at you. Doesn't matter what gets thrown at you. Doesn't matter what they throw at you. It doesn't matter. You bear with that. And yes, there are moments that's painful. And yes, there are moments when that actually does hurt. And there are moments when things get thrown at you. But you still pick up and you walk through that and you bear it. Sometimes we understand, and it's important for us to understand everyone has a bad day. No one wants to be defined by it. And so we're careful not to define each other by our bad days. And we're careful not to carry too long the things that have been thrown at us. We bear all things. The weight may be big, but because we love them, it's worth it. Believes all things? Of course it does. You ever been in a conversation where you looked at someone, if you'll just tell me this is not true, or if you'll just tell me this is true? Believes all things. Hopes all things. Let me tell you something about a relationship that you need to make sure that you understand. In a relationship, when the hope finally goes, that is a terrible place to be. There's always the hope for the future, always. In every relationship, the future in friendships and the future in with your sons and daughters, the future with your spouse, the future, there's always that hope. But when the hope is gone, that's a terrible place to be. Love always hopes, never lets go. I hear people say all the time, I'll love you forever. That's a hope that is amazing. No matter what you do or no matter what you say, I'll love you forever. And there's a hope in the heart. And when you hear those words, there's a hope in the heart that is amazing. Hope is a powerful, powerful thing. Endures all things. No matter how difficult the times are, no matter what happens, no matter, I will love you anyway. I think I read an article on Michael J. Fox one day when he went up to his wife and he said to her, "Look, I have this disease, and because I have this disease, sweetheart, I can let you out of the relationship so that you don't have to." She said, "No, no, no, no. We're in this forever." Yeah. Hope endures all things. Verse 8 says, "Love never fails," and it doesn't. It doesn't. Love never fails. You can love one another and for whatever reason have to walk away from each other tomorrow and years down the road still come back and love never fail. It's important because that does happen in relationships. Love never fails. You ever have those people that you can walk right back into their lives and just pick right back up where you left off? It was like you never left their presence. It's true. Love never fails. You never give up on each other, ever. But he says this, where there are prophecies, they'll fail. Where there are tongues, they'll cease. Where there is knowledge, it will vanish away. And he's talking about the fact that love endures and makes it through it all. In the days where there is no prophecy, in the days where there are no tongues, in the days where the knowledge begins to cease, love will never fail. By the way, it's what we're designed for. It's what we're created for. And all these things that are done in part will be done away with. Love is what makes us whole, is what he tries to say. I just read you when I was a child in verse 11. But in verse 13, he says this, "Now abide faith, hope, and love." These three things abide, is what he's saying. But the greatest of these is love. Of course it is. Do you not understand? And if you were in the podcast last week and you've been with me at any point in any of these podcasts or walk with me at any point in time, you can understand. The man's greatest love, the greatest love coming in the direction of man is from God. It's what God created him for, to love him. And God created the man to love as well, so that the love would be returned. See, we were created to love. Now, we were given a job to do, yes, but we were created to love. And out of that love, we do the things that we do. It is what it is. Yeah, we're coming up on Valentine's Day. Got the history of Valentine's Day that we were talking about. In the United States, we started handing out Valentine messages that were pre-printed in the mid-1850s. And it's become what it is today. And today, it was kind of amazing to me. Valentine's Day today in 2023, Valentine's Day was celebrated the least. The sales were down like crazy, not just because of the economy, but just because people are not celebrating the holiday. And I found out the reasons why they were not celebrating the holiday. First of all, number one, that said it's too commercialized. Number two was there wasn't really anyone to celebrate it with. And it didn't matter whether it was friendship or somebody that they had in their life. Just wasn't anyone to celebrate it with. And that I found kind of sad. But the last one really that really struck me is there's no understanding of what love actually is. It's true. Because we use that term, we use it so loosely. Well, I love this cardboard box I got. Well, I love this. I love this song. I love this. We use that term so loosely. We do. But to stop and to look at someone, it's one thing to use the term. It's another thing to know love. There's something about love that's amazing. There's something about a love that never fails, that comes from God, that is transformational to our lives. And it is. And there's something about two people that have the love of God that come together, and whether it's a friendship or whether or not it's a relationship that they're in, that is man and woman relationship that they're in, the two that love God. That love, which is amazing, is is undeniable. and it is crucial, and it is important. So for those of you that are listening to the podcast today, we're coming up on Valentine's Day. Is love really all that important? Oh, it absolutely is all that important. It's what you were created for, to be loved. You were created to love God, that there would not be a more perfect relationship than that. And then we were created to love each other, that in the relationship that we've had because we love God, this relationship with each other is amazing. And it is. And so just in a couple of days, Wednesday, Valentine's Day comes, and it does. And it's a time to celebrate those that we love in our life. And yes, it's a time to celebrate that romantic love for us, which is important. The love that a man has for a woman has for a man. That's crucial and it's important. But it's also a time that you celebrate the friendships as well. Don't forget to tell those who are close around you this week that you love them. Don't forget to tell them that you need them in their life. Don't forget to tell them that you want them in their life. And make sure that they know as well that you mean that with all your heart, so much so that if they ever need you, you're right there. That speaks volumes. Same thing with God. Lord, I need you. Lord, I want you. Lord, I love you. Lord, use me. Use me. It's crucial. Those things are important. And on this Valentine's Day, I encourage you to make sure that those who are around you know what they mean to you. That's where we are today. So, yes, we see people that are out there who have a need to be loved, and some of them chase that need like crazy. They want it. They have a need to be loved, and some of them have a need to be loved by everyone. And then others are not sure what it's like because they've been void. They have this deep need to be loved. And you want to know the core of mental illness today, where it's at, is that they've never known what that's like. And in the search for it, they've never found it. And that's the key. I'm telling you, it's at the core of mental illness. The more that we've been unhooked from the gospel of Jesus Christ in this nation, and the more that we've been unhooked from each other, the mental illness comes on like gangbusters, because the need for mankind to be loved trumps everything. And that's the podcast for today. You've been listening to Grounded, the place to hear the salty truth. I'm your host, Scott Cates. Today, let me say this. If you do not know Jesus Christ as Savior and Lord today, you have a desperate need for your sins to be forgiven. It's what stands in between you and God. It's the one thing you need to be saved from, your sins. And the one thing that Jesus Christ came and died on the cross for, because God loved you so much, he sent his son to die for your sins in your place so that your sins could be forgiven. It's not an automatic thing. You've got to ask for that forgiveness. And you've literally got to recognize that you have a need for God, that you want to be in his world, that you want him in your world, and that you have a need, that you love God. It's important. So you can stop right where you are and say, Lord, by prayer. Prayer is just talking to God and say, Lord, I need you. I need you to forgive me of my sins. I want you in my life. I want to walk with you every day. Instill a love in me for you that's amazing. And Lord, use me. You could pray that today. Come before Jesus with all of your heart and surrender your life to him. Romans 10:9 says, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For everyone who's listening this week, understand this. You are loved. God does love you. There is no doubt about it. Whether you want to believe that or not, well, I can tell you maybe that's your right, but it is a fact. It is a fact. God does love you. Second of all, let me also say this to you. There's someone else that does too. You're not alone. You're not by yourself. And today, if you feel like that and you feel, my goodness, I'm lonely, listen, put your phone down. Go get involved with some people that can feed back some love to you as you love them. And if you say, well, man, I'm having a difficult time, Scott, I can't find people, who love back in the same way, that's okay. You love anyway. We have a need to love as well as be loved. So embrace that, and happy Valentine's Day to you guys out there. Next Monday, looking forward to the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great week, folks.